you can be earning a lot of money, having sales and things like that. But if your knowledge is just capped, then you're not really growing as a person. You might be stuck with the same, routine skills, which might not be applied in other areas. Be in an environment where you can actually learn, but also at the same time, you can also earn a bit of money in. And, those skills later on will be valuable. Companies or different people that hire you or yourself might see it as valuable. And that's where you can kind of reap those benefits later on.
You're listening to Ecommerce, a Debutify podcast, your resource for one-of-a-kind insights into the world of e-commerce and business in the modern age. This is Joseph. I'll be presenting a wealth of industry knowledge from interviews with successful business people and our own state-of-the-art research. Your time is valuable, so let's go. Jeffrey Ho, it is good to have you here on Ecommerce. How you doing today? Well, how you doing tonight? How you feeling?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Joseph. It's been a while since I've actually done something like a podcast before, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to provide value, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. How long has it been?
It's been about a year or so since I did the podcast, and since about 10 months now since I did a YouTube video. So it really has been almost a year or so. So
well, here's hoping one thing we can do today is to start to get the fire burning again, get the gears spinning. So let's have some fun and get some inspiration going.
Yeah, so, sounds good. Sounds perfect.
Opening question across. I actually the question is always like who you are, what you do, but I've been like struggling with this for a while because I'd say the person's name like right away. So if he was like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I'll repeat it for everybody who forgot my name between that point and there. Anyway, so Jeffrey Ho, let us know what you're up to and what you do these days.
Yeah, so as everyone knows, I used to run a YouTube channel. I made about 80 videos now. But since then, it's been about 10 months. I've been busy with other, sort of aspirations in life. I've been working on my master's. I'm doing a master's of business administration now. As well as that, just working now at an agency, actually, that's specializing in commerce and digital kind of solutions. So we want to talk about that later on, how e-commerce can really open new opportunities and new worlds to different career opportunities if it's not, the right fit for you, entrepreneurship. But I've been just focusing a lot on, just this career aspect as well as my master's. But I'm hoping to really get back into, the world of e-commerce when I have time and, because it's something I'm really passionate about it. So that's briefly what I've been up to in the past, I guess, half a year to 1 year.
Mm-hmm. And it's a fascinating subject, which I'm looking forward to getting into because a lot of the people that I talk to, they're usually well enmeshed in e-commerce, like in the moment that I talk to them. They're in the midst of their career. They've made some of their first strides, and they're figuring out where they want to branch out and what they want to do. And so one thing that I often get to talk about is where are they going to go? Because there's some people they just stay drop shippers for good, but it seems to be the rarity. People will start their own agencies, or they'll become primarily the content creators. And I guess what happened to you is so you shifted gears back into what I would say is a more structured or a systemic work system, where work structure, where like you're working with an agency, so there's hours. So like. So my first question to you is, you're going, and by the way, this would be a good time too, by the way. So in the midst of this question, you can tell us your story of like how you got into e-commerce, because I think that's an important pillar to answer this question is, so you're going from structure to the freedom of e-commerce, which is a more loose, more like up to you. And then you go back into structure. So what was the motivation to go from, to go into e-commerce, and then the motivation to step away from it?
Yeah. So e-commerce just kind of just started out as just it wasn't really a topic of interest at first. I kind of just was browsing through social media and actually saw an article from Oberlo. I think I also mentioned that in one of the podcasts from Oberlo, or an interview. Basically I was just browsing through social media, saw an article, decided to read up on dropshipping, and that's how I found dropshipping. And decided to kind of pursue it because, it seemed kind of interesting and really intriguing. that you didn't really have to have any inventory to run the business. So that's where I got started. And I was back then I was working at like a corporate job. I was working in banking, and it wasn't something that was really, I guess, the top of my mind for e-commerce. I just wanted to try it and see where it went. I did it up my spare time, and it was cool venture to go into. Um, but yeah, after like about a year or so, I've been working on e-commerce. I kind of wanted to go back to something more routine because I figured that drop shipping itself is not a bad business model to start off, but it really limits you in terms of your ability to learn more skills. I think there's a lot of skills to be learned to drop shipping, but there comes a point where you really have to venture out to learn more about e-commerce as a whole. Because if you work, I guess, with yourself full time as an e-commerce owner or dropshipping brand owner, you really can't expose yourself to a lot of big systems and more, I guess, more established people or kind of resources. So that's kind of where I decide to kind of want to go back to bigger agencies to kind of expose myself to more projects related to e-commerce and kind of the overall big picture of it, as opposed to really just stick to drop shipping and stick to very similar, kind of ad strategies and things like that.
Hmm.
So obviously, this is just a personal preference, but it's just what I've been kind of wanting to do and kind of what I guess, want to know more about. I guess that was why I kind of stopped drop shipping, but not really um, kind of let go of e-commerce as a whole. So yeah, that was, I guess, basically the story
Hmm.
behind this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate characterizing it as your opinion, and I feel it's important on the show that whenever we get to hear a I say conflicting because I can't think of a better word for it, but a contrasting, there it is, a contrasting opinion on it. I want to run towards it because I want to make sure that our audience, if they're thinking of that on their own, it's better to hear somebody talk about it anyways. So if I could take a second to, I think I understand what the mindset is, but I'm not the one with the psychology degree. So, you can tell me how close or how far off I am. But what I think happened is in e in running, say, an e-commerce or a brand store, it is very freeing, and the store can scale and do quite well. But I can see there being limitations in the brand's ability to penetrate a more mainstream market or a more mainstream industry. It's I think it's difficult for brands in the e-commerce space to reach the level of, say, reverence or appreciation that, say, like, I don't know, Coca-Cola has, or Trident gum has. So,
Right.
and by doing that, it limits people from being able to understand what it takes to be a mainstream, or be a popularizer, or be a home, what's the word, when something is so popular that it's inside the home. Man, I am completely blanking on it. I can't remember what it's called. Anyways, when something is so popular that everybody understands it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Have you thought about, is it have you thought, has you seen anybody pull it off? Have you seen it's possible? What would you say in your experience has been the closest, I say, like someone in the e-commerce industry has penetrated them more that mainstream appeal?
I think there are a couple of e-commerce brands that have done quite well, um, and they all started off with drop shipping. But I think the amount of people who kind of broke out of drop shipping and actually scaled, not just in terms of revenue figures, but in terms of, I guess, brand reputation and brand equity. There isn't really all that many, in my
Yeah.
opinion, because it really isn't that easy to compete with people who are, like you said, already established with brands like Coca-Cola, in food and beverage, or like if you're doing a retail, something like Nike or like
Hmm.
Adidas and things like that. So very, very few. But the first thing that comes to my mind, though, like a brand that comes to my mind that does it really well and they're still like, doing really well is Gymshark. I'm not sure
Hmm.
if you heard of it.
I have, as a
Yeah,
matter of fact. Yeah.
yeah, they actually started off with drop shipping, from what I can recall and from my knowledge, and they actually branched out to being an actual e-commerce brand and endorsing a lot of athletes. But um, the possibility of actually becoming the next Gymshark is almost negligible because the people usually lack the resources to do so, and they're competing with a lot of bigger brands, and they lack the I guess brand positioning.
Hmm.
Um, you know, but that's not to say it's not possible, but it's definitely going to be harder nowadays. So yeah, that's why I think, I guess, in terms of this topic.
Hmm. Yeah, and also I remember now the word I was looking for was household name. That was it. For something to become a household
Also,
name.
name.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
and
that's true.
Gymshark, yeah, Gymshark definitely it reached that point but it's kind of ironic because now when I hear Gymshark, I don't think of it as an e-commerce brand. I just think of it as a brand. And so in a way,
Yeah,
there's in the way that there is a stigma attached to dropshipping, there can be a stigma attached to an e-commerce brand. And some of the issue is foundational, because as dropshippers, we don't get to develop the product ourselves. Well, some people can. I spoke to someone not too long ago who developed a product from scratch, and now it's in Walmart. So that is another struggle too, is not having access to all of the foundations, not building something completely from scratch. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of struggles there. So uh, we're gonna get into the big enchilada, which I promised myself I wouldn't say that, but oh well, I tried. Which was, the psychology of like a skill transference, and I'll tell you my own story as well. But before we do that, I do want to hear a little bit more about your degree in psychology. So
sure, sure.
okay, and part of it is that, like, oh, so you get your degree in psychology with a minors in e-commerce business, and then you end up as a banking job. So
Right.
I'm interested to know exactly how, it was, it just like you worked as a teller, you just like entry level, and then they liked you and they promoted you.
Yeah. So for the banking job, it was a frontline role. I think it was just an entry level role. I worked there for about a year or two. So it was mostly a front facing, client facing role. Um, yeah. At the same time, I was also working on the e-commerce. And yeah, I guess for university, I was taking psychology, as you mentioned, but I was minoring in commerce. I wasn't really like studying e-commerce in
Oh, okay, my
particular, but
apologies. Yeah, sorry, I
just
confused the
yeah,
two.
just like business in general, I guess. And yeah, I just thought it was a cool opportunity to, you know, tap into something that's pretty, I guess, trending at that time. E-commerce and dropshipping, and I guess yeah, that's how I got into it.
Yeah, and with the psychology degree, the thing that I was thinking about when I was getting set up to do this conversation is that I think people are drawn to degrees that reflect some of, who they are and how they understand it. So rather than just try to build a skill set from scratch based off nothing, it's something within you. It's maybe like an analytical brain that you've had all along, and so the idea of pursuing that in school is a way to take a lot of your organic skills and being able to craft them and be able to apply a more
Right.
analytical approach to it. So, what
Yeah.
what drove you to getting the psychology degree? And follow up, how has it
Yeah.
changed like the way you interact with people? Like, do you get to like do like a Sherlock Holmes thing where you're doing calculations and as you're talking to other people's and kind of like
Yeah.
understanding them?
A lot of people tend to have like this misconception where if you study psychology, you seem to have this special skill to read people's minds, but that usually isn't the case. But
Ah, sure.
yeah, when you
I was
study
so sure.
psychology, yeah, yeah. I mean, we all want to have that skill. Obviously, to read people's minds, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I guess when you study psychology, you really understand. You study basically the concepts of human behavior, and we use those kind of theories and concepts to predict the different types of behaviors, different types of I guess social interactions, and by the end of the day, it's like a prediction. You can't really say for sure because there's a lot of other factors, external factors that you can't really dismiss in the real world. So I guess in terms of knowledge, you kind of gain that kind of insight as a psychology major, but you can't really say that you know that behavior exactly is caused by this specific thing or like event or something like that. So yeah, I guess that's where psychology comes into play here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And have you used it as a way to understand yourself on a deeper level? Was there anything that like it clicked when you were given some more analytical tools to even like notice what your own behavior was?
Um, Psychology, to be honest, it would be it's more uh, not really, because in the world of e-commerce, I think um, a lot of the behavior is you're able to track it digitally through data analytics, right?
Hmm.
It's not so much about social interactions, but rather the different kind of behaviors that you see on your website that your users are showing or displaying. And for example, you have different types of KPI that shows like different bounce rate or like a click through rate, things like that. That really isn't explained through human psychology, but rather just their behavior that's online. So obviously, psychology can help in I guess how they uh, interact in person, but maybe not so much when they're browsing something to buy.
Hmm.
Um, that I think data analytics is something that's more useful and more important. And that's I guess that's why a lot of people nowadays they are you know they need people who are very I guess proficient in data analytics and they understand how to use it
Hmm.
and all that. So yeah,
Yeah, I understand that completely. When it takes a certain mind to see the behaviors of so many people. I mean, the more metrics you see, the more people are involved in each individual.
yeah,
They get up, they eat breakfast. I assume they have their own wants and needs, and so to even to handle all of that is certainly a unique and appreciated skill set. So with that, so the main topic that we wanted to do today, and by the way, I appreciate that it was what you suggested that we talk about, so it does mean a lot when somebody knows like what they want to bring to the table. So I just want to say thank you for that.
mm,
It's the
yeah,
concept of
so
transferable skills, and you'll notice
yeah,
some of what we've talked about so far. You'll see how it'll come into play as we talk about this. So can I get you to set this up for us, the concept of the transferable skills, and what's
sure.
the important what's the starting point for our audience to understand what we're going to do here?
Yeah. So transferable skills, what we mentioned prior to the interview was um, the kind of skills that you can take away from venturing into e-commerce. Things like, understanding data analytics, knowing how to write good copy, making cool creatives that tracks the audience, making a very beautiful landing page, things like that. These are transferable skills after you've been inside e-commerce and dropshipping. The other side to it is skills that you've acquired that you can bring inside as you venture into e-commerce. So as you mentioned before, a lot of people have different backgrounds. I know you're from a performing, kind of that background. There are these different type of skills that you kind of garner before e-commerce, and if you're looking to kind of transfer into e-commerce, you can take those into kind of into consideration and make it an advantage for you. So I guess for example is like the most obvious example is if you're someone who's into information technology or someone who's into something more quantitative, you really have an edge in terms of going into e-commerce because you're looking to data every day. You are trying to understand what those mean. You're trying to understand the implications of it and what you can do with that data. And I think for those people who have an IT background, they're more kind of data driven and they're more, I guess, objective when it comes to decision making. And, it's either, black or white. And so if you have these skills before entering into e-commerce, you really have an edge over other people because you know what to look for and you know how to take those kind of data into advantage. And obviously, the same goes for other type of careers or like other types of skill sets as well, such as communication. If you have customer service skills, you can be really good at customer inquiries, answering different questions, actually making really relevant and very and accurate FAQs in your business page, things like that. So when I say transferable skills, I really mean what kind of skill sets can you bring to the table that will give you a competitive edge when you start your e-commerce business. That's really what I mean.
So the audience that knows this, that I took a performance program, and I get actually kind of anxious to say what it was because it changes people's perception of me. But the program was based on comedy, so there were classes on how to write sketches, production, history of comedy. There's some other courses too that we had to take as electives, like English, for instance. And naturally, a lot of the people in the program were shit disturbers, and so for the electives, not very many professors were willing to teach the students because a lot of them didn't make very good students. Um, and the concern was as follows: is the more concentrated in the industry that we get, the harder it is to excel because you have a lot of competition. There's a lot of people who are
Yeah,
vying for the good stage time, and even some of the most talented performers who can uh, do excellent on stage, they just couldn't get anywhere. And they can be at it for years, and so a lot of them would want to move to the States where there's more opportunity, but even then it's hyper competitive. And what he said was, so when you're in this bubble, it's great for developing your skills, but the problem is there's a lot of other competition there. So the further you get outside of the bubble, your skills actually heighten in their importance because it's relative. In context, imagine going to a small town where nobody even does like an open mic night and hosting the show there. Suddenly, everything that the person learns would be a lot more important because there's no one else around to do anything. The downside, of course, is that it might give a person an inflated sense of their own skill set where like a bunch of people will
right,
worship them
right,
as a god, but then they go to town where there's actually a more cultured understanding of the craft, and then the person actually finds out that they're mediocre at best. So,
right.
and that's one of the things that I think is going on here, that when people can develop skills in a hyper concentrated environment, they can actually step out into an area that's far more appreciative or has much greater use of those needs. So when I stepped into e-commerce coming from a performance background, you don't get as many performers as you do people who know how to read data sheets and understand the marketing.
Right.
So in that sense, I feel that the job that I'm able to do here is largely based off a skill set that is more in demand here than it would be in other places.
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of agree. Yeah, once nobody has that skill that you have, you tend to be more valuable as a, I guess, when you're looking for a job, or like when you're actually trying to pitch to someone, or for your own good. You tend to have this kind of competitive edge, right? You like suddenly you're like this odd one out, like in a good way, and you bring a lot more to the table than everyone else. So it's definitely a good thing to have, I think.
Yeah, and so the other thing that we wanted to talk about too, that's important to this is for the audience. Let's say that they find that e-commerce isn't really working for them. So there's a few things to unfold here, and one of them is going to be, what skills would we say are the most um, beneficial long term, so that even if they do exit e-commerce, what they learned within this environment can be useful to them in has the best chance of being useful to them outside of that.
Yeah. I think when it comes to running your own e-commerce business, there's a lot of kind of valuable skills that you can take away from it. I think I just mentioned a couple before, one of which includes, copywriting, things like that. You really know how to communicate to your audience, and driving them to kind of perform a particular action. So in terms of e-commerce, you can write copy that sells to people. So if you have a product to sell, you can write in a way that will drive them to make a purchase. Um, Writing things that sell is a very valuable skill nowadays, and a lot of companies also want this. So that's another skill you can kind of bring to the table in the corporate world if entrepreneurship is not for you. Second one is, I guess, data analytics. We mentioned before, having the ability to actually read into what customers are doing on your website. So, how much time are they spending on the website? Now you know. What can you do? What does that mean? I guess what's the click through rate for your ads? Now you know. You know, the higher the click through rate, the more attractive your ad is, or the lower. Um, you know, now you know how and what you can work on. You know, things like these data analytics, it helps you understand. Also really useful in corporate, you know, because everyone nowadays, they're shifting to digital, they're shifting to online. A lot of people need to read into data to improve, to to change, you know, understanding what the bottleneck is in your business. You know, all of them revolves around interpreting data, so that's very useful. I guess another one is, you know, customer service, like I mentioned before, being able to satisfy your customers, knowing how to communicate with them, how to, you know, I guess not escalate, but like make things better if you know, if there are issues, there are angry customers, you know how to communicate with them, having that tolerance and patience to do so. You know, these soft skills. Um, I guess video editing, that's also really useful. You know, learning Photoshop, learning how to edit the videos, you know, your ads. All these skills, they're really useful, and you might actually use them in the future, not all of them, but at least you know a thing or two about it. And you know, if that particular role or whatever requires you to develop further, at least you have that foundation. You know, you can work on it further, and you can be ahead of a lot of people, you know, just by having this exposure to e-commerce. So I think it's not a terrible idea. You know, even if it doesn't work out at the end, you can still learn a few skills along the way.
Yeah, and,
So yeah,
what I think is compelling too about your position is that you did succeed. You know, it went pretty well. You know, Overload
yeah, it
doesn't
was
just
okay.
pull random people off the street
Yeah,
to ask for advice. They ask people who are doing well in this space. So, yeah, I hear you
yeah,
being modest. So, yeah, it was okay. You know, I made a couple of figures here. So, you know, I respect that. So, I guess that's another one of the things that was demystifying, even just like getting set up to talk to you, is that transitioning out of it doesn't have to be a failure thing. Sometimes it's just like, you know, this is actually going pretty well, but I'm like you're saying, I'm not learning the skills I want to continue. So, was that the also part of the motivation to go from your banking job into e-commerce? Was it also part of the learning process where you felt like you weren't really like developing your skills in that front facing position?
right. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why you could say. Um, it was also because, like, you know, obviously there's also a lot of things to learn in banking. I'm not trying to, you know, talk down on them. Obviously, banking is a very, I guess, is a very respected role. But you know, the kind of skills you learn is a bit different from e-commerce. And when you're starting off as like a pretty entry level role, you don't really learn that much. You're trying to, I guess, understand the foundation first, and then as you go, you know, deeper down into, you know, your career, that's where you learn the kind of more, I guess, advanced or like more in-depth knowledge surrounding banking. But yeah, back then I felt that I learned already what there is to be learned in the front-facing role, and even like on top of that, like I wasn't really passionate about banking. I think that was one of the more important factors and more important reasons why I didn't really want to pursue it. So I guess it's a combination, to answer your question, between not having that passion and at the same time learning already what there is needed to be learned. That kind of, I guess, prevented me or made me not want to pursue this further.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And I think, you know, in the position that I have right now, there is a great deal of learning. A lot of it has to do with just, you know, the questions that I ask guests, right? Learning, you know, our company is rapidly evolving and expanding, and so there is a lot of new that comes in. And so what I think happens here is, I think each person has to find a position that is a healthy balance between the learning and the labor. If something is like almost like 100% labor, like a burger flipping job, and there's not a lot of learning
yeah,
involved, then somebody becomes stagnant. And stagnation is actually just decay if you consider how everything else continues to advance and even currency inflates. So stagnation can actually end up putting a person behind and not hold a position. So what I
Yeah,
think is what was happening with you as well is like you want to learn, and obviously labor is always going to be involved, but I think you leaned heavily into wanting to continue to learn so that you can continue to
yeah,
develop your ability to provide labor. At some point, we all have to work. Like we all have to like get our hands busy in one way or
yeah,
another.
right. Yeah, I kind of understand that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it depends on your priorities as well. Like if you want money, sure, you can. Drop shipping is a really good. It's a very lucrative business still, and still is. Might be harder, but it still is. But um, but if you're looking to, I guess, further your knowledge and you want to learn more, um, uh, you know, it might be worth exploring other opportunities because there comes a time where everything you've learned in drop shipping might not be um, I guess you can't really learn more in terms of the realm of drop shipping. It depends on your priorities, whether you want to be earning money or you really want to, I guess, develop further and, kind of expand your knowledge in, e-commerce in general. So really depends on the person
Yeah,
you
and
ask,
I also
I
think
think.
it depends on the person in how much of their workload they want to be systemic employment versus how much of it they want it to be entrepreneurship. I hear multiple
Hmm.
stories. I hear people that they're still working full time, but they also have their e-commerce business. People who quit, focus entirely on e-commerce. So, would I don't know, what can you, even if it's just a prediction, but can you get a sense of how what would be a happy balance for you? Like how much of your work week would be systemic versus how much of it would be entrepreneurship?
Do you mean back then when I was working on my full-time job and I was working e-commerce on the side?
If it helps answer the
Or
question, but I was thinking more along the lines of like where we're going now for you.
oh, okay. Nowadays, I can't really devote too much time on e-commerce because when I come back from my career, my job, I still have to work on my master's. So I don't really have much time to kind of work on my e-commerce business as much as I want to. So, but that's just kind of a personal thing and kind of a restraint on my end. But that's not to say it's not possible. It just might be a bit more tough um, for someone like me or someone else with like a very intense schedule like that. But I guess in terms of if you're just a person who has a 9 to 5 job or like a regular job who isn't really whose job isn't really labor intensive, I think it's still possible to pull off uh, working as having an e-commerce business on the side and actually working on it at night times, especially since if you kind of get off at around 5 or 6, you still have about a 2 to 3 hour period at least per night to work on it. And I think that's ample time to kind of get the thing off the ground and um, learn more about e-commerce, through YouTube videos or like actually implementing, different parts of the business, like, the website or like an email sequence and things like that. So it's definitely not impossible. It's just more about time management, I think.
Yeah, and I
So
think what you're saying about it being labor intensive is a huge factor. If somebody comes home from work and they're completely drained because they were lifting steel girders all day, I don't blame them for not having the energy to.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
A lot of risk
Yeah,
involved in it, so
yeah,
that part makes sense.
yeah. Not
Um,
just mentally. No, I mean, not just physically, but
not
also
just yeah,
mentally. If you feel mentally drained, you don't want to be working, right?
right, yeah, the mental equivalent of steel girders.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
that's like and that actually
Yeah.
ties. I think in terms of mental strain. So I think a lot of that ties into how much of the job is learning. And a lot of it can just be like for instance, I would say coming from a sales background is that there's a lot of like adaptation in the moment because each individual client or every time I get a phone call, I have to learn the person. I have to understand their habits and their patterns and try to figure out what is the best way to close a sale with them. Some of it is over time. Some of it becomes routine. Like I will get asked the same question multiple times, and so over time it does get easier to say those, and then the challenge is like making it sound natural each time. So I think what one of the issues too is the more that a job teaches. This is my problem. I don't know if this is a general thing, but my problem is that the more I have to learn on the job, the more drained I am mentally. So
Right. Yeah.
It is important to understand like, well, how the more a job is teaching, the more I think there's a good incentive to stay there, because in the long run, the skills that I develop over time will be more beneficial. So,
Right.
learning is I think the more you learn, it's more of a metric for you're in the right place, and
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
something that's going to contribute to your growth in one way or another.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
That
you do got to
basically
make your
means
money
that,
too.
yeah, obviously,
Yeah, you got to get paid.
there's a fine balance between, making good money and, having the capacity or having the opportunity to learn, because, you can be earning a lot of money, having sales and things like that. But if your knowledge is just capped, then you're not really growing as a person. And if your knowledge is really capped, then you might be stuck with the same, routine skills, which might not be applied in other areas. So, it's always good to be, well, in my opinion, is, find be in an environment where you can actually learn, but also at the same time you can also earn a bit of money in. Even if it means in the beginning you might not learn, you might not be earning a lot. You can still learn a lot of valuable skills, which you can later apply, and those skills later on will be valuable. People, companies or different people that hire you or yourself might see as valuable, and that's where you can kind of reap those benefits later on. So
Yeah,
good to
and
have
I
that
think
balance.
it's important to because somebody can be told how to do something and they can memorize how to do it, but the key is to understand something on a fundamental level. And the reason why I say that is that learning things on a fundamental level help prevent degradation. If I'm just memorizing something and then I come in the next day and the rules have changed, then I have to rememorize it and my understanding hasn't have happened at all. So that is another important thing to deal with too. Is um, like I was saying earlier, learning, especially fundamentally, keeps you from uh, being behind. Where if everybody else continues to learn and to adapt, and they understand things fundamentally, it just goes back to some of the very first conversations that I had. Is that each day is an opportunity to layer something new on top of what you learned the last day.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, it does get kind of discouraging sometimes to think about like how, because
Yeah.
things are changing so often. Something that I've learned like can actually like not exist. Something I had a problem with a lot of games that I would play, where like put a new weapon would come out, we learn how to use it, and like a week later the weapon's gone. Like, well, gee, thanks for
Yeah,
wasting my time.
irrelevant now to skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel. Yeah, I think there's a difference between understanding the foundations of something and actually memorizing something. Because memorizing is, I think we've all been through this before. In high school or like primary school, you memorize the different areas in the world. Geography. When you take geography, you memorize where everything is in the map. That's memorization. But and when it comes to foundation, building the building blocks to something, that involves understanding that thing or concept as well, not just memorizing for what it is, but what those mean and what you can do with it later on. So I think building a foundation for something is definitely more valuable and more important than just memorizing something, because that's where you can kind of have something to build on top of, and that's where you can really, I guess, learn that skill later on, and transfer it later on in other aspects of life.
Hmm.
So
I there was I this is a very specific question, just about like your mindset going back into a more structured work environment. How was it going back to kind of a silly question, but I genuinely want to know, how was it going back to taking orders, where somebody would like
yeah,
basically tell you what to do,
yeah,
and when it has to get done,
yeah,
versus you giving yourself orders.
yeah. I mean, obviously, it's not a good feeling, right? But you have to be from a position of, I guess, how do you say this? Like, you have to be kind of like a sponge, because at the end of the day, when you're entering the corporate world, you have to understand that sure, you have a couple of years of experience under the belt, but there's always going to be someone who has more experience than you, and you have to come from a perspective of being grounded and being very, I guess, uh, the opposite of arrogant. Like, you have to be an open
Humble.
mind and, yeah, humble and willing to learn a lot more. Obviously, that's a lot different when it comes to you know when running your own business, because you're on your own. You don't have to take orders. You feel on top of the world sometimes, because when you you see success, you attribute the success to your personal achievement, your ability. Um, it's different in the corporate world, but obviously because people are a lot better than you in terms of the skills, their skill sets, their experience, and things like that. But you just have to understand that everyone starts off the same. We're all at the same stage at one point, and you're just basically there um, so that people can teach you the skills that they've acquired before. So so yeah, it's definitely a shift in mindset, and you just have to kind of adapt and focus on the positives and what you can learn from it, rather than just saying like, oh, now I feel really inferior. You just have to kind of let go of your ego and just learn and look at it from that perspective, I guess. So
Yeah, it could be a tricky transitional process for somebody who like has that the more initiative somebody takes, the more like they're on their own boss to then um,
yeah,
move into something else. I think a lot of will depend too on the company structure, where if a
yeah,
company
that too.
tries to elevate each individual and say, we're all partners. Okay, some partners are the partners who clean the toilets, but also we're all, we all have to contribute in order for this company to run effectively. So a lot of that will have to do with like finding the right place to work that actually elevates you and values your prior experience, which leads me to another question. This is also like more of like a practical one, but when applying for the job, is on your resume in specific. And if this is like moved to a private thing, it's cool, it's whatever. But that's actually like something that people might come up with. They gotta put this on their resume. So how do, you've been at this for a while, and you've had your it, as you say, it went okay. But how did you actually transfer that onto the resume when applying for it? Keeping in mind, the reason why I think this is an important question is usually when people are writing their resume, it's they're going from one systemic business to the next. So there's a through line there. Whereas in your case, it's the entrepreneurship side of it. So yeah, just how did you write it on your resume?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question. I mean, kind of a tricky process as well, because it really depends on the company you're applying for. Some companies like it that you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you have an entrepreneurial kind of aspirations as well. Some don't. They just want you to be a worker. They want you to take orders. So it really depends on the company you're working for. Fortunately for mine, since I work at a digital agency, and a lot of those employees now are very entrepreneur driven, and they were once entrepreneur themselves, they value entrepreneurship a lot more, and they don't really mind you working on a side business as long as you deliver results. So I think it really depends on the corporate culture of the company and what they value, and whether or not they kind of allow colleagues or employees to work on their own thing, outside of work. Um, for me, it's been a tough kind of a tough journey in the beginning, because I would say I was an entrepreneur before. I ran my own business, as an e-commerce owner, co-founder, whatever you want to call it. But some companies I don't hear back because they might be a bit, um, I guess, friend in some ways, because you might be a direct competitor to them. But some others, they're okay, as I mentioned. But it's really about kind of finding ways to make it seem like you won't be a threat to them, and instead focusing on how you can provide value for them. I think that's most important. In addition to the corporate culture, of course, you have to take that into consideration. But yeah, I guess later on, I just decided to kind of change it more, and position it as me um, being more of an e-commerce kind of coordinator, or like a manager sort of role, as opposed to being a CEO and founder. I think that was when I kind of more, I had more success with, um, finding interviews and actually going through the different rounds with the managers. Um, so yeah, it could be really tricky in the first couple of months when you make this transition, but it's really all about finding the right points and being strategic about um, and using your words, and how you want to present this experience to your future employer or like the people you work with. So
Right, and I suppose too, it also has a great deal to do with the industry at large. Like because you said that
yeah,
you're
that's
working
it.
for a digital agency, the connective tissue between those 2 points is easier to grasp rather than I don't know. Just pulling out the top of my head, I would say I'm trying to think of like a good example. I guess I would say I going back into or not that you were in IT, but like if somebody were switching into IT is a highly laborious position, and it's a lot of like servicing people internally. So it's a lot of just taking the tasks as they come in and doing them. So there can be room for I have some friends in IT, so I can speak a little bit to this, but like there is room for taking initiative, but companies, depending on how in touch the say like the CEO or the boards are with the needs of the people, they can be protective of their legacy software and they never want to have it
Yeah,
switched. And so the IT
yeah,
people just kind of
for
like have
sure.
to live with that. Even they know better and they know that this can be improved. They just kind of have to like live with it.
Yeah. I think most important is the competitive aspect of it, like whether you're going to be there as an employee or like as someone who adds value to company versus someone who's there to steal your information, steal your clients, and steal your business.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big factor when it comes to, oh, should I hire this guy or not? Is this guy actually going to be a valuable asset to the company, or is he just there to steal all the information for our company and leave? That's, I guess, something that's running inside your mind as well.
Yeah, we that we need to deal with that. That's for sure. Although,
Yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't. I guess I'm just trying to imagine like if somebody goes into the industry for the first. Anyways, I don't know. I don't want to get into like what are the warning signs or the red flags of like somebody who's going to pull that
yeah,
stuff out. Because
that's
sometimes,
another topic for
yeah,
another.
yeah. But I guess one point I'll make to that is that you never know. Like some people they go in with good intentions and they get burned and they want to get revenge. And so, yeah, anyways,
Yeah, that sometimes happens.
yeah. So,
Work politics.
exactly. Politics, so vicious. So one of the things that I didn't mention to you before we recorded is just like your status with your YouTube, because I know you've wanted to make content and you went so far as to say that you will, but um, I think what happened is like I think your last video, as you're willing to get back into it, it was before COVID hit, and COVID just kind of like changes everything, right? So, what I was wondering is, what's going through your mind these days with your YouTube content? Are you still planning on making videos? And how do you, remembering thinking what we said before about say like degradation and adaptation? A lot is changing in e-commerce. So, if you wanted to get back into making videos now, how do you feel you can best provide value to people?
Yeah, like you said, it's been a while since I actually gone, since the last time I actually made a video. That was at the same time, that also means that, I might not be as updated as I was before in regards to the trends of e-commerce or what's happening now, what's working best. So I think in order to provide actual value and informative content to, the people who follow me, it might be important for me, also be a responsibility for me to do some research prior to making a video and understanding, what's going on in the industry and what's trending right now and what you should avoid right now before really making the video. I think that part of having that due diligence is kind of responsibility for a YouTuber, and something that you really have to keep in mind before spreading false information. So yeah, I guess if I were to make a video, which I hope to in the next, I guess, month or so, hopefully, I can do that and read more about what's going on now, what the best strategies are, and then make it from there. So yeah, I'm really hoping to get back into it sometime because it's a pretty fun experience.
Yeah, have you thought about making content based somewhat off what we've even talked about today? Just get more insights into your journey, switching into the digital agency and working on your master's
Yeah,
degree.
yeah. I think at some point I think I might consider doing that, but at the end of the day, I think when I make content for YouTube, I make it based around what people want to see. Not saying that I don't focus on content that I want to make, but in terms of the YouTube algorithm, it won't fare well for me in terms of the YouTube growth. So I think I would have like a healthy balance between making those type of videos, and also providing more practical knowledge and strategies that people are kind of used to seeing or what they want to see.
Hmm.
But it's definitely not a bad idea to include that in my content. I think
Yeah,
it would be
and that's a good
I
point
guess a bit
too
impactful.
about it's a good point too about the algorithm because it does depend on what returns or what takeaway or what growth that somebody needs their uh, the energy they expend to yield. So what I mean by that is if
Yeah,
I think what you're saying is like if I'm going to put I have a lot to do, right? You have a lot to do. So if you're going to make the YouTube content, it has to have some element of returns, just so that way you don't end up expending the energy needlessly. And it also speaks to I think the importance of like I mean, for me, for instance, I was just yesterday I was fiddling with D Live because I wanted to set up my own game stream. But do I have any like I have no intention whatsoever of like figuring out what the algorithm wants from me. Same with my own personal YouTube channel. Again, I don't think about that. I just make whatever I want to make. So in that same way, it's important to find that balance between learning and labor. We also can say that it is important to find the balance between like what is an outlet to just expend my energy freely just to for my own self-satisfaction versus what's an outlet where if I'm going to expend the energy I do need to see something tangible in return.
yeah, I think I agree with that too. But I guess it also depends on whether I guess what stage you're at in your YouTube journey. Like if you're starting off, um, you can have fun with your YouTube content. That doesn't really matter too much. But once you reach a certain level in your YouTube career or YouTube journey, like for example, if you have like 50,000 subscribers, you will tend to have more of a responsibility and more of a incentive to want to make content that will further drive growth for your channel because you're already seeing so much momentum. You want to make it even better, right? Whereas if you have like a few hundred subscribers, for example, people tend to be more, I guess, uh, they would make content that's more um, tailored to themselves rather than what people want to see. So it would be usually more based around their interests and what they want to make as opposed to what the algorithm wants them to make, if that makes sense. So also depends on what stage you're at and your priorities at the end of the day. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Somebody blows
yeah,
up on YouTube, and so all of a sudden they have like 20,000 fans expecting content. Like, okay, yeah,
exactly.
the pressure's on a bit. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you
a
have a
really good
burden
point.
now, because
Yeah,
you have a
exactly.
following.
Yeah,
People want to see it.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So I've got you for only a little bit while longer. So there is one other question that I really
Mhm.
wanted to get your take on, which is, um, it's just the your take on like drop shipping as a label. And I myself, even
Mhm.
over the course of this episode, I
Mhm.
like we both referred to people as like drop shippers. At least I think you have. I don't know. Pretty sure you did, but I can't remember every last thing that was said. Anyways, lately, I feel like I have an issue with that term, which is that I think it puts too much emphasis on what is essentially the fulfillment method. So, if you have, let's just, what would be an example of like, I could have thought one in advance and I didn't. So, sucks to be me. But I would like to hear your opinion on like just even the label of being a drop shipper. And because remember, one thing that you pointed out earlier is how it is harder now to to be in e-commerce and to use the drop shipping fulfillment method. And a lot of that is because like a lot of there's a lot of new, we can call them barriers and obstacles, but it's really more of like regulations and just like less things that people can get away with, so to speak, as an industry evolves and there's more rules. So in a way, it's re-elevated the drop shipping method to try to get closer to, again, back to what we said earlier, closer to other brands that people recognize. So while e-commerce still has to find a way in there, it's it's I would say it's closer, it's easier in that way to have a brand that can have household presence, but it's also harder to actually like get your foundations and to actually succeed. So all of that said, that's just kind of the some of the theories that are going through my mind. But like, I just want to hear how you feel about dropshipping as a whole these days.
Yeah. Yes. So I guess as I mentioned before, dropshipping is kind of getting more difficult. Coming into 2021 and onwards. I think it's going to be more emphasis on focusing on the, building a brand, obviously, and focusing on the customer as opposed to making money a lot, in the first couple of months that you run your business. I think the priority and the mindset has shifted, but traditionally, what is drop shipping is, it's an easy method that's, has a lot of opportunity, it's very lucrative, very lucrative. Sorry. It's something that has a really low barrier to entry. Anyone can start it. But now, over the years since it's gotten more popular since 2016 onwards, now it's becoming more of a business model that requires not necessarily investment, but more due diligence and more
Yeah.
effort around building something that's credible and something that is not just a run of the mill design kind of website. Something that's more professional, something that has a good backend system, something that has good branding elements. I think these are something to really focus on now coming into 2021 onwards. And brands like Gymshark and Nike and all these are household brands that we should now look more into, and to see kind of what they do, what they're doing right, and why people are trusting that brand, and what they're providing in terms of value, in addition to the products. So I think these are the type of elements that people should really focus on. Um, Getting into e-commerce now, dropshipping 2021, which is not something that people really focus on a few years back. It was relatively easy back then. You throw up a product that's in demand, you throw a couple of ads on Facebook, you get sales, and
Yep.
you fulfill the method, and like you have 4 weeks shipping time. But now it's more like, you want customer service, you want shipping times to be reduced, you want a good brand, you want a good designed, well-designed website. These are the sort of things that, people should focus on now. Um, and yeah, I guess on top of that, I just want to talk about, drop shipping, the concept of drop shipping and the stigma attached to it. I think you mentioned before that, when people say drop shipping, they have a lot of negative kind of associations with it.
Yeah.
It's either like cheap, China, made in China, Alibaba, AliExpress. But as you mentioned before, drop shipping is merely a fulfillment method, and people need to understand that. And it's just not something that people should take advantage of, or should really misunderstand. This is about this concept. It's it's basically a fulfillment method, and it's not something that you can make a lot of money from real quick. And um, yeah, there's just we should really change the definition of dropshipping, I think, moving forward, by not doing these same mistakes again and making a cheap looking website, and having like 5 week shipping times. So I guess that's my
Yeah.
interpretation right now and what I've gathered through these few years.
Yeah, I try my best to like not go on Facebook these days, just because it can get addictive. Next thing I know, I've wasted like 10 minutes. But I was doing a little bit of a scroll,
Yeah.
and one of my friends, he had posted this review of like this store that was selling these octopuses where you can turn them inside out and it turns into a different color octopus. It's a little fleshy. I'm sure if I go onto AliExpress, I can find it. And he was a scathing review where I contacted customer service, they never responded, they never sent the product, they just took my money, complete scam. And I just looked at him
Yeah.
like a year ago, I would have thought, boy, that company, man, they started off with such good intentions, but they are just falling apart. But now I'm like, now I understand. It's just a drop shipper.
Yeah.
It's somebody who's just like just
Yeah.
like a rip and runner. Like I've been there.
Yeah.
I know what that feels like.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the industry, just from my observation, obviously, I'm coming up on my first year in the industry, and I'm proud to be a part of it in my own small way. Um, but it is harder, but it is good hard, because it, going back to what we're saying, it compels people within it to learn real tangible skills that can actually lead to running a successful business, not just using the dropshipping fulfillment method, but skills that actually help running business in general.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, whenever I see like an ad on Facebook that sells a certain product, which I don't now, fortunately, because I think I turned off those ads already. But whenever I do see it and I see comments in that ad saying, "Oh, my product hasn't arrived yet. It's been 5 weeks, or the quality is bad." I
Yeah.
just assume it's a drop shipping brand, because usually they don't take care too they don't take too much care, you know, of their customers and the shipping times. So
Yeah.
that's just kind of an interesting story and interesting kind of insight.
Yeah. Well, my
Yeah,
my final say on them is if people are gonna suck, let them. You know, it gives people who do a good job a chance to elevate themselves more and to
yeah,
stand out and be and like, wow, you know, I've bought other things online and they said and they I thought I was buying a blue dress, but it turns out it was white and all this all that other stuff. So with that, I know it's late for you, so I'm gonna get you on ad ears. I don't know, like
Mhm.
is your bedtime intimate, or do you stay up a little while longer after
No,
this?
no, I stay up pretty late. I stay
Really?
around, until like 2 or 3. So it's all good.
Okay, okay, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all good. It's all good.
yeah. I'm trying to transition more to like a morning person. It is not working. Anyways,
Yeah.
so the final question is, if you have any like parting words of wisdom or last bits of advice or like an answer to a question I didn't ask, anything along those lines you want to share with us, you're more than welcome to. And then let the audience know how they can. Okay, well, to be fair, you know, you want to get your content up and again, but the content that you did put out can still be of value. So let the audience know if they want to check it out, where they can go look.
Yeah. You can just search Jeffrey Ho on YouTube. I think I should be the first one that pops up on the feed. Um, I guess you can also follow me on Instagram. It's just Hey, I'm Jeff Ho. But my profile is, I think, private right now. So as long as you let me know that you know me through this podcast or like through other channels, I can definitely accept it. And yeah, I guess parting advice is, focus more on the customer, be value driven rather than money driven, in dropshipping, and focus your efforts and your time on building a proper website, and work on, I guess, a good landing page, and work on driving good traffic, and be good at digital marketing. I guess that's kind of one of the more relevant advice I can give right now.
Well, it's as always for our audience, it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to collect this information and share it. So we
Mhm.
certainly are
Yeah,
happy
my
to do
pleasure.
our
My pleasure.
part. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm happy to have you here too. It was great to have this conversation and to just kind of like explore that side of it, because there's a lot of pieces to the e-commerce puzzle, and this was
Mhm.
a piece of it that I honestly I didn't even think to cover. So it
Mhm.
helps to know that there's still a lot left to be discovered, even at the point that I am at now,
Mhm.
like 90 episodes in. Like there's the
Yeah,
further I go along, the more I realize how much bigger things are really getting. So, with
yeah,
that said,
definitely.
thanks one more time, and to our audience, all the best. Take care, and we'll check in soon.
First time online shoppers in the marketplace for the first time last year, definitely seeing a huge exponential growth.
Hey, this is Joseph from Ecommerce. Just wanted to thank you for being here and for giving this content your time and attention. I hope you learned something. I can say with certainty, I have learned something with every episode that I have done, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. There's a couple things you can do to help us out. If you want to check out the audio content, we are available on all major podcast platform distributors. And while you're there, give us a 5-star review. It helps a lot. And while you're here on YouTube, there's a lot of things you can do to help out as well. It's not going to take very long. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button for this episode, and hit the notification bell so when we have new content for you, it's going to be at your doorstep ASAP. Lastly, this podcast is created by Debutify, the best Shopify template available. It is 100% free for you to start, and it can change your life. It can make you so much more free than you are right now. So if this episode wasn't enough to convince you, I think a few more might do the trick. So have at it.